Hi everyone, my name is Leah Kopke and I'm a 3D motion design freelancer. I also have a podcast where each week I cover another 3D modeling tool for Cinema 4D. Hello and welcome. Today we're going over not just one 3D modeling tool, but two. We're going over the FFD Deformer and all the settings for it. It's really useful for bending your shapes in not just one direction, but multiple directions, and really transforming them. You could 3D model anything using this tool, from an airplane to anything with curvature, basically. We're also going over the Array tool, which is useful for anything that has repeating shapes within it. It's very similar to the clone tool, a little bit different. We covered the clone tool before. If you want to learn about that, you can check it out in the description below. I'll leave a link to the other video. But let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be using the FFD Deformer and the Array in order to 3D model a lotus flower. You can see that we have this cage around this flower that's actually deforming it. If I were to move one of these points here, you'll be able to see that it moves the entire mesh and it deforms that direction. So this is a really cool tool, and we're going to be going over how it works. And I also created this pedal array. I'll turn off the FFD deformer. I created this using the Array tool because I like to 3D model things the easiest way possible, and this took the least amount of work. It doesn't require any plugins, really. You can render this in any renderer you'd like, but let's go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and hit this plus button here to make a new project, and we're starting from scratch. I started off with actually a spline primitive over here. I used the star because I wanted to shape the petals myself instead of using the flower where all the petals look very similar. So I used the star shape, and I changed the number of points to 6 because I felt like that seemed good. I changed the inner and outer radius. I'll just change this to about 5 and the outer radius to about 6 for right now. I'm working in inches. You might be working in a different unit, and that's fine. This is really, to a large degree, personal preference. How big do you want your flower to be? You can work in any units you want to. Feel free to get creative with it. You don't have to follow everything I do exactly, because sometimes you learn more when you just get a little bit creative and you explore a little bit. So we have our inner radius and our outer radius, and this is a pretty good start. I want to make this flower editable because I want to use the pen tool, which we've covered in the past. I'll leave a link to that tutorial as well. I want to use the pen tool in order to change the shape of these points here so that this looks a little bit more like a lotus flower would. So what I'll do is I'll hit this button here. You can do the same thing with the C hotkey. And you can see up here that our star icon has now changed to a spline icon because this is editable. Now we can go into our point mode and select our points. I've changed the color of my spline in my settings actually so that it's a little bit easier for you to see while I'm talking. Now that I have this point selected, I'll hit the middle mouse button to come out of this view, and I'll hit the middle mouse button again in the front view, and that'll help us navigate to this view instead. I want to adjust this point, and in order to do that, we're going to need to change this from linear to Bezier. And the reason for that is that it gives us these handles we can adjust now using the spline pen tool. So I'll go ahead and grab this, and the reason why I like working in this view is it's a lot easier to move the handle of the spline the way I'd like to instead of in all three axes. It's easier to do it this way. So I'll hold down Shift. If you remember the hotkey we covered before, Shift breaks the tangent so we can bend this. I find that lotus flowers have a little bit of a point there. So I want to go ahead and break these tangents so that they have a little bit more of that lotus flower shape. And I'm not trying to make these symmetrical by any means because I feel like nature isn't perfectly symmetrical. It definitely follows symmetry at some points, but it's not always perfectly symmetrical. So I like breaking that up a little bit by doing things like this, and things don't always need to be perfectly mathematically symmetrical. So here we go. We have some petals here. We have one more left to go over here. And we have our petals. I want to select these center points and just scale them in a little bit. So I'm going to hold down the T hotkey and I'm going to scale these in to make these petals a little bit longer. And this is looking pretty nice to me. Now this flower should be perfectly flat, and we can check in this view. If it has any distortions, they're gonna look kind of funny later. So I just like to make sure that they're all lined up nice and neat, and they are. The next thing I need to do is add this to an extrude. Now I went over the extrude in a past episode. These episodes kind of build on one another. So if you want to learn everything you can about this extrude tool, you can in that episode. I'll still explain all the settings we're using today within the extrude, but if you want to know all of them entirely inside of that tool and everything that's possible with it, you can check out that tutorial. I'll leave a link to it as always. So I'm going to rename this Petal Extrude, and I'll rename this star Petal Spline so that everything's neat and organized and makes sense. Now we have our start cap and our end cap. We don't really need our end cap here. You could see that this is our start cap when I turn it off, and our end cap's on the other end, and now this is just a hole, which is fine, but I, in this case, just want the start cap. And I don't even really want this to have any depth to it, so I'll make that 0. And this is basically just the shape on a plane right now, which is fine. So we aren't really using the extrude in the traditional sense. If you wanted to, you could give this flower some thickness. I don't really feel like it's necessary to have the extra polygons because it's so thin, those flower petals, where I don't think it'll be noticeable and it's not worth the extra geometry. So I have this shape here and it's looking decent. I want to make this editable so that I can use the array with it, because remember, the array is a mesh tool, and our mesh tools work with polygons, points, and edges. So if we want to use our array, we'll need to make this editable. Before we make this editable, I want to check on our topology a little bit, because we are going to deform this. And right now you can see this has not the best topology for deforming this. If we were to add something in here, it wouldn't really work well. Like any one of these deformers really wouldn't work well because it doesn't have enough edges in order to bend. So we need to change this. Within our spline, we have these different options here. I'm going to change this to uniform. I'm also going to go into our extrude and go into our caps, and I'll adjust this to say regular grid. If I want this to be quad dominant, I can select this here and it'll make many of these triangles quads again. I can adjust the size of our grid a little bit, and I can also continue adjusting our number here. So the more of these that we have, the more detailed our mesh will be, but it will also make our scene a little bit heavier and it'll take a little bit longer to calculate. So it's actually better if you keep this relatively low poly. This is probably good right now. It's good to keep this relatively low poly, and you can always add in more detail later and drop this into a subdivision surface if you'd like to. But this will be enough to deform it without making your scene too heavy. So I think this is pretty decent. Now, since this is a mesh that will be easier for us to work with, we can go ahead and make this editable using the C hotkey. So now we have this over here, and if you wanted to, you could go ahead and remove these extra triangles using the hotkey MN. We can remove that edge. We can remove this edge here. And that'll just help clean up the topology a little bit if you'd like to. And then if you want to, you can even reconnect that and redraw that line so it looks a little bit neater. So you can take this as far as you want to in terms of making the topology nice and neat. I probably won't spend too much time on this just because I don't want to keep you guys waiting for me. But I did want to show you how to remove those triangles if you wanted to, because you may not want them in your mesh. Here we go. MN, MN, MK for the knife tool. And I'll leave a link to the knife tool as well. It's actually called the line cut tool. It used to be called the knife tool. Now I'm just in a habit of calling it that. But that's looking good to me. And I'll go ahead and just move this out here a little bit to make that a nicer point. Something I can do is I can click on these 2 points, and then I can hit the M hotkey, and I can weld these together using Q. And I'll just weld these 2 points together over here so that we have a triangle here at the end. I'm okay with having a triangle at the end because I want that to be a point and it works for this topology. So I'll just do that really quick to clean this up, and this is looking pretty nice and low poly and good to go. Now we're going to need more of these, and the way we're going to do that is using the array tool. So what we first need to do is we need to select what we'd like to use the array on. So we want to use this flower, and I'm going to turn it around, 90 degrees, so I'm holding down Shift so I activate quantize while I'm rotating using the R hotkey. And you'll notice that these polygons are purple, which means they're upside down. So what I'll probably end up doing is hitting reverse normals so that they're facing the other way. And we'll need duplicates of this that are rotated. The way to do this is with the Array tool. So you can find this while we're in polygon mode here on the right. Since I have all of the polygons selected, we can click on Array. And I find that what helps you preview it is actually if you hit apply. And you'll see our flowers are really far away. So these are the default settings. We're going to need to adjust these. So just to put them within your viewing range, we're going to adjust all of those to 1 and go through what these settings are. So you can adjust your clones in the X direction. I'll set all of these back to 1 for now. You can adjust your clones in the X direction, and you can offset them using this here. So you can choose the number you have and how much they're offset. So we don't want to offset these in the X direction, so I'll set these back like that. You have the Y direction, and this is actually the direction we want to offset them in. You could also offset these in the Z direction, and you can adjust these settings down here to adjust how much that offset is. So this is the X, Y, and Z offset. For right now, we just need the Y, and we want these to be pretty close together, so I'll do something like 0.1. We don't really need 12 sets of flower petals, so I'll change this to something more like 4. I'm going to exaggerate this a little bit just so you can see it. If you increase the percentage of holes, that just means that it won't have every single one of these clones show up. So I have 4, and I have 77% of them just about hidden. So this percentage helps you control that. If I have this at 0, 0 are hidden. So that's what the holes are. You can vary this in the X, Y, and Z directions. This is varying the offset. So if we were to want to vary this in the Y direction, we'd use this middle one here. And now you can see that it is varied and not the same across. So that's a way to add some randomization. You can randomize the position here. You can randomize the scale here. And you can randomize the rotation here a little bit. So I, for right now, don't want to randomize the move or the scale. I just want to randomize the rotation. So we'll adjust this here, and that'll look nice. I'm going to change this back down to about 4. And I'll change our offset back to about 0.1 to make it nice and small. And I can just adjust these until they're at a point in which I feel happy with them. This is probably good right here. So what the uniform scale allows you to do is it allows you to keep the same scale across all your objects, the same ratio of scale in the X, Y, and Z direction across all of your objects while you're adjusting the scale variation. So that's just something to be aware of. That's in here. Real-time update lets you see your changes in real time as we have now. If I were to adjust this, you can see this adjusting in real time, and that's because we have this checked on here. Apply applies the transformation. New transformation will apply it again. So if you want to apply this again to another object, you can. If you want to apply these exact settings, that's the way to do it. So we have these pedals here. Now we need to show how to use the FFD with this. While I was using the spline pen, I think I accidentally added in another spline. I don't really need it, so I'm going to go ahead and just delete that. This is all that I really need right now. And you'll notice that the main difference between this array tool and the clone that we've used in the past is that the array allows you to clone within one single mesh, versus the cloner would have made several meshes in order to clone something. So there are two different ways of cloning, the array and the clone. You can also find these tools up here under the mesh menu under clone. So that's how you can do it. And you can find your FFD within your deformers by holding a click here, and you'll see FFD is right here. We can put this within the hierarchy of our pedals. We can choose fit to parent. You can adjust the number of points within your grid. So these grid points are what you're going to be moving in order to control this. If you remember what I was showing before with the lotus flower, if you move one of the points, it moves the whole mesh that's being controlled. So if I move this point, it's moving everything. So we can choose how many points we have within our cage, and this is our cage, our FFD cage. So I can increase the number of points in the X to 4, the number of points in the Y. I actually want to take down to just 2, so there's 2 in the Y, and then 4 going in the Z. This grid size is the spacing. I like to use fit to parent, and it'll just automatically size your FFD cage to whatever your mesh is. So now we have this over here. If I click on our points right over here, we can go ahead and start changing how this looks. So what I first want to do is just select these points here in the center, making sure they're selected on both sides, and they are. And I just want to pull this back. So you can see this is starting to deform here a little bit. And I do want there to be some spacing here, so I'll select these points on the top here. Just the ones above. And I want there to be a little bit more spacing, so I'll just move these up a little bit so that there's less intersections happening. And this is looking pretty nice. Now we have these other points over here. So I'm going to select these top ones going along here so that we can deform this further. We'll go all the way around. I'm holding down Shift as I add to the selection, and that allows me to add them to the selection instead of just clicking on a different point. I'll go all the way around. And now I'm going to hit the T key for scale. And I'll click out here and drag my mouse in so that we start scaling. And you can see that I missed a point over here. So I'm actually going to go back and click on this holding Shift after undoing that and try doing this again. And now our petals are bending inwards. So this is a really easy and fast way to make something that looks like a lotus flower. And you can even adjust the height of these. Maybe you want the center petals to be a little bit lower, so you can drop those down. And this was pretty quick and easy and beautiful. If you enjoyed this tutorial, I go over another 3D modeling tool each week, and I hope you'll come and join me again for next week. I hope to see you then here on Ambient 3D Animations.